Welcome to the Teachers of BC podcast. Real stories, real teachers, real life. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Indigenous people of British Columbia. Haichka.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Teachers of BC podcast. Real teachers, real stories, and real life. It's Nicole here, and I'm so excited to sit back down with Jill for part 2 of our 2-part series in which we discuss ways to improve teacher mental health. If you haven't yet, do check out part 1, which focuses on what we can do inside the classroom, at work, during stressful moments. And yes, we've all had a few of those. How do we limit the stress? And how do we improve our cognitive resiliency so that we can cope better with our day-to-day stress? Now in part 2, we are going to explore work-life balance and what we can do outside of work to improve our mental health. A teacher gives so much of their time to others, and we often feel a bit guilty when we take time for ourselves, or perhaps the thought of even taking time for yourself can cause you stress. I know when I felt like I needed a mental health day that sometimes the thought of writing a TTOC plan or not even knowing even if I'll get a TTOC has caused me to give up on the concept, and then I try to fumble my way through the next day, sometimes successfully, sometimes very unsuccessfully. We often feel that we are not doing enough, or when you get home and you remember that you have a pile of marking that you needed to get done, you know, that pile of marking that has traveled to and from school a couple times before you actually get to it, especially if you're anything like me anyway. So you're often exhausted and all you want to do is snuggle up with a glass of wine and watch Netflix. But is that enough for us to truly de-stress from the day? So it's my pleasure to sit down again with Jillian Schultz, who is a concurrent disorder clinician with the Vancouver Coastal Health, where she works with individuals that are struggling with substance abuse issues and mental health. She also happens to be one of my very good friends and a music teacher. So we are lucky to have her on our show again today. So Jill, let's just dive right in. What can our listeners do to try and find a better work-life balance and to try and really improve their mental health so that they can cope better and become better teachers?
You know, distraction methods are a wonderful thing. There's a time to be really present in the moment and to work on that, to work on your breath, to work on grounding, to work on calming. And then there's also what we call distraction, like self-soothing coping strategies, which is essentially what people do for fun, right? Find ways to take your mind off things that are healthy and productive. So I don't mean drinking and using drugs per se, because that's obviously a very common way that we all deal with stress, is to take the pressure off with a glass of wine or a cigarette or whatever that is. So you want to just remind yourself what makes you happy. What takes your mind off things? What's different from work? It's really important to have a separation from your work and your personal life in some capacity so that you're not on, so that you're not telling your brain that I'm in work mode 24/7. That's like telling yourself my nervous system needs to be on fire this entire time, right? And then that gets you into autopilot, and then it's hard to shut it off, and it's hard to remember that there are other things that are worth living for, right? Because
absolutely.
If work is a source of stress and you're always in work mode, then you're going to feel as if there's nothing else. And that's what leads to burnout as well. So work-life balance, I mean, there's countless books and talks and podcasts about this, and I think everyone has a pretty good concept of what it is. Are you doing it?
Do it?
Are you doing it, and how are you doing it? Because that's the challenge with today's society and with these jobs that seem to never quit and to ask of extra duties outside of work at home, like marking and everything. I don't know how you teachers do that, honestly. But yeah, carving out time, if you can. Take time for yourself, and you actually space out and do something that you love. You're actually going to be more productive. You're going to be more productive in the workplace. Countless research out there with work productivity and employee retention shows that when you take little cat naps, or when you go and do a music lesson, or when you exercise regularly, employees are happier, healthier, and they stay at their jobs longer.
So definitely find that hobby that is unrelated to teaching, but brings you joy.
Yeah.
And you touched on a couple. So, I mean, some people might not know what makes them happy.
That's
so
right.
What advice can you give those who have, gotten to that stage where they're just like, I'm just so stressed that I can't find joy and I can't find that thing?
That's a hard one, because if we spend so many years doing it, it's almost like you're back at the bottom figuring out, who am I? Right? And that's the question you want to ask, is who am I? What does make me happy? What kind of things have I always wanted to do and I've never tried because I just didn't have the confidence to, or I just didn't have the time to do it, and I just put my career first.
And family too.
And family,
of
course. And so it's really a self-exploration project is what it is. The more that you get into who you are and what makes you happy, and what do you have to offer. You want to ask yourself those questions. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? What do I have to offer? What is my purpose here? What makes me happy? Because when you make yourselves happy, when we look after ourselves properly, we're better able to do our jobs. We're going to be less resentful and more present when we're actually at the job. When you give yourself psychological space, you're more present and more productive, and you have more energy to apply yourself in the work.
Yeah.
So when you realize and remember, when you really remember that, it makes it easier to
let
give
go.
yourself and let go and give yourself actually that space. You don't feel so selfish anymore. You're like, actually, I'm going to be a better teacher, or I'm going to be a better blah, blah, blah if I do this.
So if you give yourself that break, and if you give yourself that fun activity, you're actually going to perform better in the classroom, and you're going to be better for your students.
Yeah, and you're going to be happier.
And you're going to be happier.
And you're going to be role modeling that for your students too, right? People, do you want your teacher? Do you want to see your teacher burnt out and stressed? Do you want to see your teacher have extracurricular hobbies and other things going on in their lives? Of course you do. That's inspiring, right? But it looks different for everyone. So I give examples, but hey, not everyone needs to lift weights, and does it have to be the gym? Does it have to be exercise? Maybe. I mean, they say exercise is a pretty consistently productive, beneficial, healthy choice that everyone should have some of, obviously. But anything that gives you an ability to have some creativity in your life, right? What does that look? What does that look like? Is it art? Is it sports? Is it music? Is it social? Is it just, are you a social person? Or are you an introvert that likes to write? Or spend time at home doing whatever projects that look like? Gardening, housework, woodwork. I don't know. We could list 1,000 of them. Everyone's going to be different. But something for you.
For me, as Jill knows, I've tried to dabble in writing music. And it's nothing that I would, write home about. But when I'm at that piano and when I'm playing, I did feel a sense of joy. So I'm going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can look at it a couple ways too. It's like, what makes me happy? What have I not been doing in my life that I would love to try? Or is it as simple as, what makes me feel good? Do I just feel better when I run once a week? Maybe I do, right? Or maybe I'm a goal-oriented person. Maybe you're the type of person that needs to actually have something like a project to complete, because that motivates you. Motivation is another topic.
Oh my goodness!
I could go on and on and on about, because
absolutely,
as human beings, it's very interesting how motivation works. How do we apply ourselves and follow through on projects? What motivates you? What actually gets you going? For myself as a musician, I noticed over the years, and even to this day, if I don't have something to work towards, it's very difficult to just do it for the sake of doing it. And I think that's an interesting point. It's lovely if you're in a place where you can just do a hobby or an activity and enjoy it just for the sake of what it is.
For the sake of doing it.
But a lot of us really do, to get us to actually get started on something and to stick with it, we do sort of need that extra little, okay, well, what's the reward? What's that end goal? What's my hope or purpose for doing this? Whether it's just, I want to be able to write a song by the end of the year, or learn an instrument and learn one tune. or it's I want to be able to run 2K or 5K, or maybe it's 15K. What is your goal? What are you hoping to get out of it? That will help you consistently follow through on that activity as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of motivation, it's like going to the gym, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's those days where I just want to go home and I don't want to go to the gym at all. And I really have to force myself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So,
I'm sure people can relate to that.
It's very challenging, but when I'm there, when I get there and when I've finished, I feel so wonderful. So it always is so like confusing to me. Why was it so hard to get in my car and go to the gym when I know that it's going to make me feel so good?
I'll relate to that. Again, it's the getting there. It's getting your foot out the door to get to that gig or get to that program that you want to do that you know is going to feel good, but actually getting yourself there, because you know what's happening? Is we're so tired. We're tired, we're mentally drained as a culture in general, as anyone can understand, not just teachers in our jobs, we're tired. So when anything seems like it's more work, well, why do I want to do more work when I just finished work?
Yeah.
It's work, it's asking something of myself. I'm still having to go and do something. So there's a bit of an issue there when we see things as sort of like a chore, or like, oh, I gotta go and do this because I know it's good for me, blah, blah, blah. Then it becomes a thing that you want to avoid and hide from. So we want to get away from that. That's really hard to do, because that's, I mean, for example, take me, or take all of my friends almost everyone I know watches TV to unwind.
Yes,
right?
I'm
Because it's
so
passive.
guilty of that.
It's a passive activity that requires nothing of you, right? So it's very appealing. When you do a sport or a hobby of any kind, you're asking something of yourself, right? So if you're tired at your job and you're not stoked these days because of stress or just whatever's going on at the work site, and you're burnt out, then the very thing that's going to make you happy, like exercise, it might backfire on you. You might actually go, oh, this is another thing I have to do. I'm so tired, I don't want to do anything.
Yeah,
And
I'd rather just switch on the television.
Exactly. And I think there isn't a clear answer to that. You're going to have to find your own method of motivation to get yourself to do that very thing.
What helps me is getting everything ready the night before.
Ooh, I like that.
So if I know I'm having a bad week, get everything ready the night before.
Smart.
So if I'm going on a picnic or I'm going out for a hike, I will get my shoes ready. I will get my snacks ready. I will get everything like that ready the night before, so that when I wake up in the morning, everything's ready to go. All I have to do is get into the car and drive.
I love that you touched on that, Nicole, because it's quite brilliant. Really, you have to almost get ahead of yourself. You gotta figure out what are your little cheats. What are your little things that you normally do to get out of things?
So you're tricking yourself.
You're tricking yourself a little bit. And you're also figuring out, okay, well, what works for me? Am I a routine-oriented, structured person? Most teachers, I think, are.
Yes, we like being organized.
Yeah, so there is something to say about routine and patterns. And it does take a long time to establish a new habit. Now, this is another topic I could talk to you all about for hours and hours. Habit forming is actually quite difficult. It takes more than a week or a couple of days to form a habit. To form a habit, it takes months of consistently following through on something before it becomes just automatic. And what you want is you want to eventually get yourself to a place where it is automatic. And you've trained yourself, just like you've trained a dog, to get up in the morning and go and do this thing, right? It's the same for all of us. We're not that hard. We're quite easily predictable, in my opinion, and from what the research has shown us, right? So it's sort of like that same principle, the 10,000 hour rule, to become proficient or an expert, per se, in any one thing. They say 10,000 hours is what it requires. Well, that requires consistent practice. Same thing with any kind of self-care activity. You want to form a habit. You want to give yourself a timeline or a reference point, and so many hours or minutes per week where you're consistently doing that activity until it becomes second nature. Right?
Wow, thank you so much, Jill, for all of your insights. And could you just give us like